Welcome to Perspectives from the Top, and today it is my great privilege to be talking to Lord Karan Bilimoria, the chairman and founder of Cobra Beer. Karan comes from a respected Indian family with business and military roots. His father was a general in the Indian Army, and in fact his grandfather was the first Indian to go through the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. Karan studied law at Cambridge, but whilst doing so he was playing polo, which led on to one of his earliest business ventures because he noticed that British polo sticks were vastly inferior to Indian polo sticks, and so he started importing Indian polo sticks to the point at which Harrods were stocking them. 1989, with his co-founder Aaron Reddy in a flat in Fulham, he decided to create Cobra Beer, a beer that was light, smooth and not gassy, that would be a perfect complement for any meal, particularly an Indian meal. He and Aaron worked with a brewery in India to create the first batches of Cobra, and they were delivered by Karan personally in his 2CV to Indian restaurants around the streets of London. The brand flourished and production was moved to the United Kingdom. In 2006, Karan was elevated to the upper house of the UK Parliament as Baron Bilimoria of Chelsea, and in 2009 Cobra went into a strategic venture with Molson Coors. Now, not only is Karan the chairman and founder of Cobra Beer, but also he is chairman of his own charitable foundation, Chancellor of the University of Birmingham, and as a member of the upper house of the British Parliament, a frequent speaker on matters that are important to the future of the United Kingdom. So it is a great pleasure and privilege to have such an entrepreneurial leader and someone with such a broad brush of contribution to the country. So welcome, Karan.
Thank you.
I talk to many leaders, senior leaders, about how they got to where they got to, and they often say to me, they give the impression that it's all about them, but when you dig a bit deeper, there's always somebody underneath that was an inspiration, a mentor, that helped them on that journey. Did you have a similar experience to that?
Absolutely. You look back on it and you are who you are because of your family, your parents to start off with all the influences of both sides of your family. And I've been lucky that I've had wonderful parents and their wonderful families that I have learned from and been brought up in and been inspired by, from my great-grandfather, my mother's grandfather, who was a member of the Indian upper house, the equivalent of the House of Lords, who was an entrepreneur himself, a philanthropist, a public servant. I've been inspired by him, and I am to this day, 4 generations later, to my own father, who you spoke about, who was a general when he retired, in charge of the Central Indian Army of 350,000 troops, and the leadership lessons I've seen firsthand from my own father, and the values that I've been taught by my parents, by my mother. Those are really the bedrock of everything in life.
And flipping it round from the inspiration that you have received from others, from your perspective, on the journey you've been on, what is it that you find makes people give their best? What is it? Is it their boss? Is it the purpose of the organisation? Is it the chief executive? What have you seen from your journey?
I've seen from the very early days of Cobra Beer where you start off with an unknown brand, and I call starting a new business crossing the credibility gap. You have zero credibility and nobody knows you or your product or your brand. How do you get in that position people to work with you and for you? How do you get people to buy from you, supply you and finance you? And I learnt very early on that people will do those things if you personally have a passion and faith and belief in your idea, in your brand, in your product and in yourself. And that gives people the faith to trust you, to give you a chance, including people wanting to work with you. And a leader, I think, of any organization of any size, and particularly a startup entrepreneurial business, has to have a very clear vision of where they want to take their brand, their product or their business, and they have to have the ability to articulate that, convey that to other people so that other people buy into that vision and are just as passionate as you are and want to go on that journey with you.
So it's about effectively transmitting the belief.
Yes, it all starts with belief. You have to believe. If you believe, then you got to get others to believe, because It's Mahatma Gandhi's saying, which I'll paraphrase: your beliefs become your thoughts become your words, your words become your actions become your habits form your character, and your character determines your destiny. It all starts with the belief.
But do you think that to some degree what happens is that often as organisations get larger, that belief drops, and there are many people in many organisations out there who don't believe? Is that, are we underestimating the value of belief in terms of literally return on investment?
It is absolutely crucial. And the larger the organization gets, the more challenging it is for the leader at the very top to communicate that to everyone, whether it's an organization of hundreds of people or tens of thousands of people. You've got to be able to communicate that. And nowadays, of course, it's much easier to do that. There's no better way to do that than face-to-face.
Indeed.
But even if you can't be face-to-face, there are ways of communicating that belief nowadays around the world.
What I find is really interesting is that belief part is to some degree more emotional than rational. And have you found from your experience that emotion is the real power behind success? Once you have a good plan, that the emotion is the key driver?
Well, the other analogy is, you would say entrepreneurs are great risk takers. Yes, we are risk takers, but we are very calculating risk takers. They're calculated risks. And every entrepreneur will always look at the downside as well. It's not just as pure optimism and taking risks. You will always measure the downside. In the same way, it's not just emotional, I would call it rational emotional.
Absolutely.
So if it's emotion based on rationality, if there's a real foundation for that belief and emotion and passion, then people will really believe. So in my case, I created a beer. Now anyone could say I've created the best beer in the world.
Yep.
But why is mine genuinely the best beer in the world? Why is mine genuinely different and better to others? Is because I've created this beer that's in between a lager and an ale, and has a refreshment of a lager and the smoothness of an ale. And why? Because then it makes it a balanced beer and has a global appealing taste, and it goes really well with all food around the world, including Indian food. Now that's rational, that's real. I can test that and challenge you. Now taste my beer with food compared with any other beer, and I challenge you, mine will taste better. Wow, that's real, it works, it's rational. Now you can get passionate and emotional about it as well.
Which I think is really interesting if you look at that from the perspective of the sort of strategic level, that you have a logical, rational plan that makes sense, plus the fact that you believe in it. I think one of the challenges that organisations have as they get larger, that dilutes as you get lower down the organisation. Because it's interesting, the figures would suggest that an employee's decision to give high performance is 60% rational, but also 40% emotional. So there's that belief element. And I think what is your perspective about then the importance of the individual's own boss in presenting that belief and rational plan?
It is important at every stage of an organization. So I'm a firm believer that the leader makes a huge difference. And the leader sets the tone, the leader sets the vision, and the leader is crucial. However, it's at every stage people are dealing with. And I would take an extreme example. If you take the armed forces, in the armed forces you have this concept of service leadership. In the armed forces you have the leader of a battalion, for example, who's a colonel, but then you have a private who is willing to give their lives. Now, they're willing to give their lives. Why? They're going to do it rationally? Well, emotionally? Yes. They'll do it for the esprit de corps. Now, the esprit de corps, that loyalty, is not just the colonel saying and believing and being passionate and ordering, but an actual genuine belief and passion in the regiment, in the battalion, in their colleagues, in their comrades. They'll do it for that and for the love of the country as well. So it's a combination of the leader and your colleagues and the emotion you feel for your purpose and that vision.
Well, as an ex-military guy, I completely get that. I think one of the problems is that that people who have not been within that environment, where they have experienced that level of esprit de corps, where they have experienced that level of trust, often have no understanding of the degree to which that can make people exceed even their own expectations and do things that actually rationally would be insane, because it is that desire to succeed, that desire to support your colleagues no matter what. And I think one of the things I always say to organisations is that is about a we, not me culture. And the problem is with many commercial organisations, there's often a me, not we culture. And that the more you can move towards the we, not me, the better. And that's down to the leadership then. Is that accurate?
I couldn't agree with that more. And then you as an individual can not only support your colleagues, you can inspire each other. So I've stepped into this discussion we're having just addressed my sales team. And with the sales team, I encourage them to share the good news that as individuals they're performing, so that they can inspire each other from what they're doing. So again, you're doing it yourself, you're doing well, but that helps others do well, which helps the whole company do well.
What is also interesting, going to your military analysis as well, is that one of the things that the military is particularly good at is to give particularly young officers and warrant officers the ability to manage and execute tasks effectively through prioritization, time management, delegation, communication, and giving feedback. And my experience has been one of the weaknesses of commercial organizations is that they expect people to be leaders without having put those basics in place. And when I talk to leaders around the world, I ask the fundamental question: how many of you in this room have ever been taught how to delegate effectively on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah.
Never more than 30% is the answer.
Yes.
So do you think that you can't be a great leader or an effective leader if that shortfall in capability is there? Because then you can't create the belief, because the capability has to be there to create the belief. Do you think that is an issue within the commercial world?
It is always a challenge to make sure that you have everyone in your organization skilled to the highest level for what they're doing, and including the basics. Now, we have a mantra that we hire for will rather than skill. Ideally both. But to me, it's the will that's more important. Is that person willing to go the extra mile? That's the most important thing. The skill will follow. But people have to understand the basics, and delegation is one of the most important things. And delegation and the lack of delegation is one of the biggest reasons entrepreneurial companies don't grow, because the entrepreneur doesn't let go. But letting go is an art. It's not just, you do it, I'm off, see you later. Delegation is A, you communicate what needs to be delegated. B, you constantly monitor once you've delegated. And that's a balance, that you're not looking over somebody's shoulder, you're giving them enough freedom to get on with it, but you're also keeping an eye on things. Next is you actually make sure it's done, and then there's the follow-up afterwards as well. So you have to go through all the stages of delegation. It's not just saying, do it, and then look away. It's a process. And people have to learn that process.
I thought one of the interesting things is also link back to the emotion and link back to creating belief and also having that capability. All the people I talk to, the leaders around the world, I say, well, what was the one thing that made you give your best for that boss? And their comment always comes down to something around the most important thing was that person showed they cared about me.
Yes. Yes.
Is that your experience as well?
The care is so crucial. So one is for people to be proud of you as their leader. That sense of pride in the organization and the brand and in the leader. So whenever they see you, they're proud of seeing you, but whenever they hear about you, they're proud, oh, that's my leader. And to the extent that they are willing to boast about their leader to other people, saying, that's my leader that I'm proud to be working with. But it's so much give and take. The caring aspect. I mean, I monitor our sales team, even with a company now the scale that we're at. There's a daily WhatsApp group where I know who's opened which account and which product, and I will personally congratulate each one of the salespeople and say thank you and well done, and everyone else sees that as well. So I'm constantly appreciating and caring and communicating because I care and because I want to, and that's how it should be.
I think that's a really interesting story because it links to a couple of other comments. I did an interview with Paul Polman at Unilever, and one of the things that Paul said was that every week he will sit down and write 4 or 5 handwritten thank you notes to employees out in the business who've done something special, because his boss used to do that with him. And I think that demonstration, that simple action of showing you are there and you care, makes a real difference, because then it goes to the heart of that we, not me culture. You are part of their team and they are part of your team. You talked about the sales team, and what I think is interesting is that obviously a sales team is entrepreneurial. But one of the challenges that I've seen is that you've been on that journey from an entrepreneur to a larger organization. Have you noticed that it is difficult to maintain that entrepreneurial ethos and mindset, not just for yourself, but for those who perhaps come into the organization? And how do you keep that living, that entrepreneurial spark?
And the big difference between entrepreneurial companies and big corporates is that entrepreneurial companies have that edge, that spark that you've just spoken about. Large companies just don't have it. And the process, the bureaucracy, seems to take over. And that spark is completely just diminished. And I found with my joint venture with Molson Coors, one of the biggest advantages is that here I'm integrated into this huge multi-billion-dollar company globally, and yet I can inject that entrepreneurial spark in everything that I do every day within this large organization. And that's the power of it, is to keep that spark alive. And in being the founder, entrepreneur, and chair, I'm in a position to do that. But how do you do it when the entrepreneur's no longer involved on a day-to-day basis in the business? And that's a challenge. It's a serious challenge. Every chief executive I've spoken to says, I wish I could get pace. I wish I could get urgency. I wish I could get passion. And I'm challenged because I've got this huge organization around the world and I don't know how to do it. And again, it comes from the leader. If you as a leader have that spirit, it will be communicated.
What I think is really interesting about the comments you make is that I have repeatedly seen that challenge in the large corporate, in that people are just not entrepreneurial. They conform to the system, they do what the system requires, and that completely obstructs anyone's ability to innovate, to be entrepreneurial, to have pace, to be responsive to customers. And certainly one of the major roles I had at UBS, we had a specific project that was designed to make people be more entrepreneurial. And it was by helping them understand what SMEs do in terms of understanding the customer, in terms of optimizing risk, not minimizing risk, in terms of constant change, in terms of keeping it slick and simple, keeping it efficient. The really interesting part of that, and maybe you found this with larger organizations, is that those who've existed in the corporate world have never been given the opportunity to think like that. But there is a population within the corporate world that when they are given that opportunity, embrace it, because for them it is inspiring. Have you found that with working with larger organizations?
Yes, you quite often will get resistance to it.
Yeah, initially, yeah.
Because there is, again, there's a different mindset. The mindset of a large organization, of somebody working in a large organization, can quite often be playing not to lose. It is always safer not to do something than to do it.
That's so true.
If you're offered an option of change, it's better to stick to the norm than to change. It's better not to take that risk and do it. Just keep things the way they are. Oh my gosh, if I do this and it goes wrong, then I'm gonna suffer as a result of it. The entrepreneurial mindset is completely the opposite. It's playing to win. Now, when you have a playing to win mindset, it's you're seeking opportunities. You're seeking ways to do things quickly and implement things. So I'll give you another example. Earlier today, I was talking to my marketing manager, and we had to tweak an oncoming advertising campaign that was meant to start this month. Now I've been told it's happening at the end of May. And to me, it's, why can't we do that sooner? Why does it have to be the end of May? That's my immediate instinct is, I want it to happen now. I can understand why it needs to be delayed, but can we not do it sooner? Whereas the big company mindset is, well, the end of May is when it'll happen because it's the end of May.
It's probably because you're dealing with a big marketing company that thinks that it should be the end of May. I completely agree that once the organisational wheels start turning slowly, you cannot speed them up because they continue to work at that speed. But I just find it so interesting. The question is, how can you potentially get people who have those large organisations out there, if you think about the potential they have to perform, the potential they have to inspire their people, the potential they have to deliver excellent customer focus, if only you could inject a little bit of entrepreneurial thinking into the large corporate, how do you think it's possible, or is it just completely impossible?
It absolutely is possible. You can, but you can't just do it by saying it.
No.
It's a question of actually allowing it to happen as well. And then you have this sort of cliched word, empowerment. Are you genuinely empowering people to go out there, to come up with ideas, to make them happen quickly, possibly fail occasionally, learn from those failures quickly, and move on and come up with another idea? Are you creating that sort of an environment and encouraging it and acknowledging it when it happens, rewarding it? And then people, and of course, in a large organization, the moment people see that, that's how things are done, that team there, they came up with that idea, they made it happen quickly, they've been rewarded for it, the whole world is acknowledging their success, I want to be like them. But the leader's got to enable that and actually catalyze all that. Then it spreads around the whole organization.
What is really interesting is that when I ask leaders around the world what the best boss they ever had did on a day-to-day basis that made them so special, one of the things that has come up, and I've been doing this for over 10 years, one of the things that always comes up is they let me get on with things, they understood I made genuine mistakes, they let me try to put in place my ideas. And I think we overcomplicate this. You use the word empowerment, but it isn't that complicated. It boils down to those three things. Letting people get on, understanding genuine mistakes, and asking for ideas. How complicated is that?
And having, again, one of my favorite sayings is good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. So you've got to make those mistakes, learn from those mistakes, and get better.
So what would be one piece of advice that you would give to a new, or a couple of pieces of advice to a new developing leader about how to be more effective, more successful on a day-to-day basis, given your vast experience?
As a leader, you have a huge responsibility, and you also have a huge opportunity. And if you can marry those two, and acknowledge your responsibility, but also make the most of the opportunity, you're in a position to change people's lives, change your business, transform your organization, if you can get people to buy into you. So you've got to lead in a way that your vision is very clear, you're able to communicate that to your team, you're able to get them to buy into that and work with you as a team, as passionate as you are, in making it happen.
Back to the we, not me culture. Thank you so much, Karan. Thank you.